And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us once again across the Louisiana plain, where we are elevating the cause of constitutional conservatism in Louisiana, elevating the cause of constitutional conservative citizens across the state, and rapidly now draining the Louisiana swamp. My name is Chris.
And I'm Danielle, and this is the State of Freedom, brought to you by freedom-loving Louisiana First Patriots. Hello, State of Freedom warriors. Thank you for inviting us to be part of your day. We are so grateful for you. You're the best listening family anyone could possibly hope for, and we are only here because of your encouragement, your prayers, and your financial support. If you are looking for a way to support us, to advertise with us, or to send us feedback, please visit our website at freedomstate.us. We'd really appreciate it if you'd also help us get the word out and spread the reach of the State of Freedom. Please like the show on whatever platform you listen to us, subscribe to it, and share it. You can share short clips instead of the full episodes from our YouTube and Rumble channels, and links to those are always in the show notes and over on freedomstate.us. We have a powerhouse team here this morning to talk about some recent developments in election integrity and what it could mean for the future of our elections. Before we bring in Tina Peters, Matt Meck, and Juan O Savin, let me read the scripture of the day. It's Psalm chapter 9, verses 1 through 4 and 16. And it says, "I will worship you, Lord, with my extended hands as my whole heart erupts with praise. I will tell everyone everywhere about your wonderful works. I will be glad and shout in triumph. I will sing praise to your exalted name, O Most High. For when you appear, I worship you while my enemies run in retreat. They stumble and perish before your presence, for you have stood up for my cause and vindicated me when I needed you the most. From your righteous throne, you have given me justice. The Lord is famous for his justice. While the wicked are digging a pit for others, they are actually setting the terms for their own judgment. They will fall in their own pit. Consider the truth of this and pause in his presence." And this is just such a beautiful reminder that worship is a powerful weapon of spiritual warfare. Our worship invites the presence of the Lord, and he causes our enemies to run in retreat. So let that encourage you and help to reprioritize your worship. If worship and thanksgiving cause demonic influence to run away from us, it accomplishes a lot more than we can by just focusing on our daily to-do list. So make it an ongoing practice. Worship and thanksgiving will fill your life and your home and your office with such peace. And the passage also reminds us that the Lord sees us. He will vindicate us with his perfect justice. And a lot of us are watching what people involved in evil, especially on the national stage, are doing, and we're waiting for boomerangs. And we have every reason to be. This psalm tells us that while they're digging a pit for others, they set the course for their own judgment and will be the ones trapped by their own pit, and I truly believe we will see it.
You know, Danielle, the Psalms are such a mainstay, and it's so very important that we stay in worship, that we stay in faith, because it's so easy, even doing important things, to put those things before the primary focus on God. You know, Jesus said, "Seek me first, and all else will be added unto you." And St. Paul said that we should be praying unceasingly. We should constantly be in a state of prayer. And that's how we are able to, ward off the attacks of the devil and the evil spirit. We can be doing some very great things, but if we're not putting the Lord first, then we are vulnerable to the attacks of the devil. And I know that all of our guests today know what it feels like to be attacked by the devil, and they also know what it feels like to have the Lord's vindication. What a pleasure and a blessing to have our folks on today. Tina Peters, the one and only, Matt Meck, and Juan O Savin. Thank you all for being with us and taking a little time to join the State of Freedom today. What a blessing.
It's good to be here. Thank you so much for having us. And, you reminded me that our prayers are for the tearing down of strongholds. And boy, don't we have some strongholds to be tearing down right now.
We certainly do.
Oh, boy. do we? I'd like to start with a question for any of you, any of the three of you, about the Lake Fincham case and the appeal now to the United States Supreme Court involving election fraud. I know that the matter was heard in the lower courts, including in the federal appeals court. And for whatever reason, the courts dismissed the claims. And now it is going to the U.S. Supreme Court on a final effort to appeal. I'd like to ask y'all, whoever knows, what was the basis for the dismissal of the case in the lower courts? And there may be more than one basis, but what was the primary explanation that the court gave for dismissing what appears to be a pretty compelling case of election fraud as we see it?
Well, let me dive in on that first. This Juan O Savin. I actually, and it annoys probably a lot of people, but I actually think the court was possibly correct in the lower courts on the dismissal, because the information was what they said was speculative, and there wasn't enough substantiation. Now, the evidence that was provided was looking at the data, and the data showed signs of algorithms, machine influence in how the vote was counted. They had machine errors and things like that, which the court probably should have considered. And the point is, and I certainly invite Tina or Matt to come in, but they didn't have the direct evidence nailed down that hard. But part of the point was that until they could get access to the machines through discovery, they couldn't prove out a lot of these details. And so the court process would be to provide discovery and let you go in and get access to the machines themselves. And it's arguable. I do know what the logic was, but I think the court, at the end of the day, if they let expeditions too much, it becomes disruptive in some way. So as the case went up through the ranks and the various courts, went ahead and dismissed it because it, again, lower court had said it was speculative. Now, new information was able to be added to the case as it was brought to the Supreme Court. And that evidence is in the form of declarations and data that remove the speculation. Now you got somebody going on the line saying this is exactly what happened, this is the guy that did it, type of thing. And so that compels that with this new data, which was able to be added to the case, that the speculative part goes away. And I think they have to then direct the lower court to proceed with hearing the case and proceed into discovery. And with this outline of new information that was added to the case, this is going to go a different direction. And through the process of discovery, you're going to get all sorts of stuff. And it'll be very hard to stop it from this point forward. I'd be very surprised if the Supreme Court doesn't remand it back to the lower courts and say you have to hear this case because of the new information that's been added. So I don't know if Matt or Tina have any additional thoughts themselves. And that's a very cursory first look, since the data was only available just a few hours ago for me.
And maybe before they chime in, Chris, would you mind, just for our listeners' benefit, setting the stage for what the allegations in the case are?
Yeah, well, obviously the allegations in the case is that these machines, these Dominion voting machines, are subject to manipulation and to fraud, to the switching of votes back and forth, and that they are acutely vulnerable, that they're simply not safe, and that's the point, and also that there was fraud in the process when 70 of 226 precincts, the tabulators go down for hours and hours and hours, disenfranchising people from able to vote, which affected the Fincham and Lake campaigns. I think that most of it went down in Republican stronghold areas, but essentially mainly in the machines, the vulnerabilities of the machines that affected the outcome of the vote. But I wanted to ask you this one, and anybody else as well, because you were talking about new evidence. And I was telling Danielle earlier that, the U.S. Supreme Court is really bound by the record that's before it. But if they have evidence that the defendants deliberately lied to the court about the extent to which their voting system is properly certified, and the extent to which they actually perform the proper testing to make sure that the machines are reliable and accurate, and lied about it, well, let me tell you what, that's a pretty big deal. And that is that the evidence of the new evidence that we're talking about?
So let me address that, because when they dismissed the case, it opened the way for it to be heard at the Supreme Court. 4 out of the 9 justices just need to approve it to go, and then they'll send it down to the lower court. What happens is when they dismiss it for lack of standing, then it opens up for new information to come in. So that's what we have here. It's not an appeal. An appeal is different. When you have an appeal, you have to stick with the same evidence that you had in the original trial. With the dismissals and the moving through the courts the way it did was actually a blessing, because this enables, it's not an appeal, this enables the new information to be brought in. So the new information is actually confirms what we've been saying all along. Now, we also have the 19-inch compared to the 20-inch ballots. We have the disenfranchisement of voters putting their ballots in box number 3, the tabulators that day not working. So there's a lot of information that was not considered, but there's also new information that's coming out that is on the books to come out. So, and then what they want to do so after it hasn't gotten to the docket yet, the only reason we're able to talk about it is because the other side was served and they leaked it. And now, what will happen probably Monday or Tuesday is it will be entered into the docket. So then everyone will be able to see the filing. It'll be public. And then because it's an election case, those are set for priority. And also there will be an injunction for the Supreme Court to hear this case quickly, because before, when they say it was speculative and things like that, there was injuries done in the 2020 and the 2022 election. But now they're able to prove that because it was done in the 2020 election, and then it was done again in the 2022 election, that it's a likelihood, a certainty, in other words, that it will happen again in the 2024 election. And so SCOTUS needs to intervene.
Yeah. Tina, what specifically happened? I think that the voters are very interested in this and would want to know what happened that prejudiced, just to use a legal term, Mark Fincham or Kari Lake. Can it be proven there was actual manipulation that affected the outcome, or does that remain speculative? I look at it kind of as 2 different issues. One, I think it's clearly established at this point that all machine-based voting systems are vulnerable to fraud. I mean, Alex Haldeman has said it. All the experts have said it. There's no machine that's completely invulnerable. In fact, they're a sitting target. Okay, that's one issue. On the other hand, what about evidence that actually occurred, and finally, that may or may not have actually affected the outcome of the election?
Well, I think it's common knowledge that these things have occurred. I mean, even with the Mesa County reports and J. Alex Halderman's report. So the Mesa County report 1, 2, and 3 at my website at tinapeters.us, and also these images that are on Frank's speech. The images are right there for any cyber expert to look at. But there's such a volume of information on there that we needed to have, I don't know if I can let this out yet, but basically needed to have people that knew exactly where to look. And now that is the case. There are people that, because there's so many lines of code, now there are people that know exactly where to look. And actually, Kurt Olson, who was the attorney on the case, talked about it on Bannon last night, that they're able to see the keys. The keys were left wide open. It would be like in the, and if you want me to share the filing, if you'd like for me to.
Yeah.
Do you want me to put that up?
I did listen, Tina. I did listen, Danielle, and I had a chance to listen to the Olson interview with Bannon. And it's obviously very alarming if the defendants lied about whether or not the apparatus was actually certified by the EAC, lied about whether or not they actually performed logic and accuracy tests on the machines. And they made those representations to the court. I mean, that's a fraud on the court. But I didn't really hear him talk about the proof that the proof that there was actual manipulation in the Arizona Secretary of State's race or governor's race, and whether or not that actually affected the outcome. In other words, what would a cyber expert need to be able to look at in order to be able to determine definitively, yes, these votes were switched away from Fincham or away from Lake to their opponents. And that would probably be all that needs to be shown to be able to make a case, even if you couldn't show that it affected the outcome. And maybe you can.
Hey Chris.
Yeah.
If I could,
yeah.
I know, and I know Tina's aware, there's going to be Monday or Tuesday, once this is docketed, there's going to be a request for expedited review, and there's going to be affidavits and statements of declaration specifically addressing what you said. In the words of Patrick Byrne, who, by the way, said a memorial should be erected to Tina Peters because of her.
We've already
efforts,
started. Hey, Matt, we've already started that in my backyard down here in Baton Rouge.
Oh, there you go. But just for your audience to know that the efforts that she undertook, the results from that, in their words, was the Rosetta Stone that allowed them to crack the Enigma code. And those folks who understand World War II, the Enigma code, the Nazis used, we broke it. They didn't know we broke it. It gave us an upper hand. But as he said, when Stephen Richards said, they didn't even put in new evidence. And Patrick goes, yes, but we have the hard facts of that evidence now. And number two, Patrick had texted me. He's in South America. He said the guts of all those specifics will be in these follow-on filings. So I'd say stand by. Those statements of declaration and affidavits are forthcoming. And Tina or Juan, anything else you want to add, please?
Well, the one thing that I think people need to understand is that, again, that was where the speculative was a problem. And in this latest filing, which isn't done, the details that, provide the proofs or whatever, the declarations, etc. That's what was missing earlier. And so this is being fleshed out now. I think the one thing that we have to remember in this whole thing, these things can be grindingly slow, but look at all of the cases around the country. For people who think nothing's happening, it's just more of the same. The cases are ripening, and that's, a term used legally quite often. And we're now getting things built out to the point, even with a lot of the earlier cases that were tossed for various reasons or didn't, mature properly. We're getting better at presenting it. We have more of the details and facts. This one isn't going away. And other cases that using this information, now that essentially you're finding the keys to the machine and exactly where in the code to look, it's going to get more and more difficult for those that are manipulating the vote to hide, because other cases are going to be assisted by this. In fact, some of the communications I had the other day, and Patrick was in on them part, looking at some state cases where multiple states would begin their actions. That's coming, and this is going to build out, not just with this case, but with other cases. There's a lot more here. This isn't one round. This is multiple huge rounds. It's like battleships turning sideways because they're in range now and launching off shells into the enemy's turf. And it's just going to begin shaking the earth because we're coming in multiple cases. This is the first one out of the box with this level of detail in the information, and it's gonna widen out into lots of other places.
I'm excited to share a fantastic opportunity for State of Freedom listeners who are interested in investing in precious metals or even starting a home-based business in the precious metals industry. Metal Stacks is a precious metals collectors club where you can buy your metals at the best prices on the market, actual dealer cost. They are beating the big sites. They have no credit card fees and no minimums. If you're just interested in purchasing metals at a great price, visit metalstacks.com/dwalker. Get to shopping, that helps me out. I get the commission. You can also refer people to Metal Stacks for an additional income. If you're interested in learning about the referral business aspect of Metal Stacks, email me directly at danielle@freedomstate.us for more information. We'll be really interested to see how this shakes out on Tuesday or early this coming week when the evidence is actually made clear, because that was a big part, Chris, as you mentioned, of our discussion and getting ready for this conversation. I mean, do they have to have video evidence of the votes flipping in real time inside the software? Is the code enough? Are the logs enough? It seems like the bar for evidence may be pretty high in this case because of the standing issue.
Hold on, let me just dive right in there real quick, and then I'll hand it to the other folks. Part of the deal is in some of these cases, okay, you've shown that the machines could be manipulated potentially, that there may be vulnerabilities because somebody could access the machines from outside, but then they say you don't have any evidence that that actually occurred, so you don't have the corpus delicti, the bottom of the body of the crime. You don't have the proof. And so the reality is, though, in what's been presented, and this is a very important point, everybody slow down, listen to what I'm saying with precision. The way that, as Patrick uses the term, it's the Enigma code, the part of it that was not understood previously is that when they get information in the machine, it goes into essentially a file. And you throw all of the votes that have come in into that file. But then you can come in from the outside using an algorithm, either from an external location or within the machine, and you can create another file on top of it. And then you can plum pick out of that file what you want, the votes. And that new file to the machine, to any external queries, is the only file. When you ask it, yeah, this is the file. The previous stuff in the earlier file that was plum picked disappears. It's there, but you can't see it directly.
And that's Mesa County Report 3. So that was proven in Mesa County Report number 3.
Right. And of course, that it existed, but then nobody proved that it actually had been used, except with what you did, Tina. And you have to think of this case in Arizona. The court can only make a decision based on what's in front of it. They can't go looking to prove your case for you. So the information as presented up to this point was of a certain granularity. Now, because they dismissed the case and went up through the court system, they've been able to add new evidence and bring in those facts or details. And I believe the court's going to have to remand this back to the lower courts with this new information in this case. It's not new information to the world, but it is new information in this filing. And now it'll get built out. So am I saying that correctly, Tina?
Yeah, well, in this filing too, Juan, yes, exactly right. The Ninth Circuit affirmed the district court's dismissal of the action for lack of Article 3 standing on the theory that the claim of injury is speculative. But the district court based its dismissal on 2 additional grounds: sovereign immunity and temporal issues for the 2020 election. So what they're saying is that they had and still have Article 3 standing. So for the most public function of running elections, Maricopa uses uncertified voting systems controlled by private actors and susceptible to hacking and evades the required testing. by them dismissing the case and saying they did not have standing, this writ of certiorari that was presented on Thursday actually challenges that to the Supreme Court to put it back on them because they did have standing.
What they would do, Tina, that's well stated. But the way I sort of analogize this is along these lines. We've demonstrated, and everybody knows that the front door of my house is unlocked. Everybody knows that a bad actor can come by and come in and steal whatever he wants out of my house and maybe get out of there undetected. But I haven't been able, that doesn't mean that he actually did it. And it sounds to me like, based on some of the evidence and the affidavits that are coming forward in the case that we're talking about now, the Arizona case, that we may be able to now hopefully prove that the thief actually broke in, actually stole my stuff and left. And if we can do that, then that clearly would give standing to Kari Lake and Mark Fincham, because it would show that they now have a colorable, like individualized injury that a court can address. Otherwise, it's just a sort of a generalized grievance that is sort of speculative. And so I think the linchpin is maybe Patrick Byrne on the Arizona case, Matt, may be the linchpin in all of this.
So let me just say that what the actual document that they filed says, it says this court can consider new allegations related to standing. First, Maricopa did not conduct the required logic and accuracy testing on which the district court relied to find the risk of election interference speculative. Second, Maricopa did not use certified software on which the district court relied to find the risk of election interference speculative. Third, Maricopa used software that made available to anyone with physical or remote access all passwords needed to control Maricopa elections, which confirms petitioners' allegations and evidence that past elections were manipulated. Fourth, altering election software without the Arizona Secretary of State's approval is a criminal act under Arizona law. Thereby, and it gives the law, thereby evaporating presumptions in their favor under Arizona law. It's the bursting bubble theory. Fifth, Maricopa's officials misrepresented their compliance with Arizona election law. The LNA, or logic and accuracy testing, is certified software, which negates any presumptions in their favor under Arizona law. And sixth, Maricopa officials gave up control over the complex election systems to embedded private Dominion employees who lack any presumption of regularity under Arizona law. So that's what they were talking about. These new allegations meet the tripartite test of motive, means, and opportunity that can result in a perfect storm of conditions leading to embezzlement or fraud, and that's another case. So what they're saying is the petitioner's injuries are actual and imminent, not speculative.
Well, there are certain things about it that clearly are not speculative, and all the litany that you just went through is damning for sure, insofar as the nefarious motive, as you said, and conduct of these officials. But I think in order for the Supreme Court probably to entertain it, I think maybe we're going to have to show, that there was some actual manipulation that switched the votes, and maybe we can get to that. I hope so. But there's no question,
Let me dive in for just half a second. See, in Tina's case, what was unique about what happened there, we got a before and an after when Dominion sent out people to do what they called a trusted build. In the course of looking at the before and after, we saw that they removed stuff that would help you to see how they were doing this in the earlier election, and the files underneath the files that had been removed in that trusted build. So that helps us to know where to look in these other locations. The fact that they had files that they removed, and they had files underneath of files, you're not just looking at the surface level. It kind of gave you a roadmap. Well, if they're removing that stuff, obviously they don't want you to see what's really going on here, the sleight of hand.
Huge.
But the other thing I think we have to slow down on and kind of think about, we had, when Colorado, Tina, you did that challenge, the race where you wanted to go back and look at the vote, and they had to go back and first in the recount, which cost $1 gazillion, they had to do a logic and accuracy test before the recount.
No. It wasn't a logic and accuracy test. That's what they kind of did. So the way the law prescribed that, and this is another criminal act that Secretary of State Jenna Griswold did. So it says prior to any recount, this is what the law says. Prior to any recount, that the canvass board goes and randomly picks a tabulator. So let's just say we had 4 tabulators, which we did. But this is all over the state. They pick a random tabulator. So they might pick, if there's 4, they might pick number 1 and number 4. And then they say, okay, election workers, go get me the ballots, the voter verified paper ballots that ran through those tabulators. So they bring the boxes of ballots that were filled out by the voter. And then those are hand counted. It's a sampling. Those are hand counted. And then that total is compared to the total that actually ran through the tabulator. If those 2 totals disagree, then there has to be a total hand count for the whole state for my Secretary of State race. What Secretary of State Jenna Griswold did, which was criminal, she violated that law and went and got the logic and accuracy test ballots. Now, those logic and accuracy test ballots are not voter verified. They're filled out by employees and maybe some candidates that are sitting there. They're not even real ballots. They're sample ballots, and they count them up. They say, okay, this is what the machine should say. They feed them in through the machine, and then they take the tally they've gotten of these sample ballots and compare them with the problem with that is there's 2 problems with that. So in my case, that's what they did. They broke the law when they didn't use the actual ballots, the voter filled out ballots. It's called voter verified paper ballots that ran through the tabulators. The other problem with that is we've seen from the Mesa County reports 1, 2, and 3 that there's separate partitions that are created inside of the election management system. So so in essence, the logic and accuracy test can take place in one partition, and the actual election can take place in another. So they can manipulate the actual election, but leave the partition where the logic and accuracy test. But in Arizona, they didn't even do a logic and accuracy test until after the election, or after they were.
And Tina, they said, but they represented to the court something different, right?
That's right. See, and that's the problem with all of this is they lied. I mean, they lied from one day to the next. And you could see it if you were watching the trial. You could see that the clerk lied one day, and then he said something completely different the other day.
Yeah, the goalposts keep moving.
And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh no, Tina, that's why you're here. I think what I was going to go with that was that had we not had an observer present, which they did this also on the spur of the moment up in Colorado, but I'm using it for comparative purposes to Arizona. Had we not had an observer that raced to the location where they suddenly were going to do this beginning of the recount, we wouldn't have known their little magic act trick. And it would have been presented that they had done the proper prep or test or whatever prior to the count with this random machine. They are trying to stretch us. And then there in Arizona, the question is, was there ever testing of the machines before certification and use in the election? And then it wouldn't even matter if they did when you're setting up the machines where you can actually do a test in one channel of the machine, but the actual election isn't conducted there. It's in another one. They hide so much in the way the machines operate, and it's trickery, and it sets it up for thievery. And they say, well, no, we tested everything behind door number 1 and it's fine. When you actually go in to do the vote, well, the vote isn't done behind door number 1, it's done behind door number 2. Nobody's ever been in that room. And then when they get all done, you come back to challenge them. No, there's no door number 2. This is door number 1. What are you talking about?
That's what it's shown that they do with the ballots too. So what Juan was talking about the images and about having 2 sets of databases. So what we found in Mason County report number 3 was that when the ballots go into the tabulator, so in our case it was Dominion, many other cases it's Dominion or ES&S, Hard InterCivic, it doesn't matter. They're all in a Smartmatic chassis, right? But so when the ballots go in, when the clerk, and unbeknownst to them, they feed in this ballot, this voter verified paper ballot into the tabulator, then there's an image, a picture taken of that ballot. And then we know that after about 25% of them go in, there's a second database. That's what Juan was talking about. That's created. It's like a bookie having 2 sets of books, if you want to think of it that way, and one that you see and one that you don't see. So we know that, and then some of them are transferred over to that second database. Well, we know that the image, the picture of the actual ballot has been changed because it doesn't have the accompanying SHA file. It's .sha. It's an extension on the file. So we know that it's a different picture, a different image, because it's missing that. That's the fingerprint of that particular ballot's image. So when it's changed over to the second database, we also know that it's not the same ballot because it goes through adjudication different, which means that the ovals are filled out different. And that's what's counted. So there's so much. This is why we have to get rid of the machines. There is no question. And then when you see where there's thousands, I mean, maybe millions of lines of code in the images. I'm not talking about the ballot images. I'm talking about the before and after Mesa County image that they're looking at. So there's so many lines of code that it takes someone to know where you're looking for. It's like burying a diamond in a mountain of sand, right? You want to find that diamond, but you don't know where to look. But these experts, these affidavits are going to explain exactly where that is.
And Chris and Danielle, if I could, this is why, there's a disagreement in the Republican Party, if you will, even on the MAGA side, of vote early, vote on Election Day. And I think what you're finding is why we espouse vote in person on Election Day as late as you can, because of what Tina's just alluding to. And if I could, I was on a call several days ago, and a very credible investigator, he's based up in Wisconsin, he's helping some folks up there and other parts of the country. As an example, he's credible sources that were in Europe and gave them evidence of what they have compared to voter files, registration files here in the country. Think of this, 50 million voter rolls they have access to. They move around the country. The names and addresses are fungible. That's 50 million phantom votes are plugged in and plugged out. One of the folks who's doing our coalition, Beth Beazle, she's an election judge in Dallas County. And what they found during the 2022 election, like 1 minute prior to the polls closing, the people that said checked in on her poll books jumped by 7,000. Now, they were there. There were no 7,000 people coming. That's why these machines cannot be trusted. As Juan always says, you can't fix the machines because the machines are already fixed.
So Matt, are you saying that minutes before the polls closed, the machine data showed us that 7,000 additional voters voted?
Voters just popped up on their e-poll book
in the last few minutes before the polls closed.
1 minute prior to the polls closing,
which is obviously impossible.
Yeah, which is not evidence, but it's indications someone was messing with the database, thinking that people weren't going to be paying attention 1 minute prior to the polls closing. But Beth was, and she had other people saw it, and they put affidavits in there. And sadly, sometimes, as Lindell calls them, the biggest blockers are the establishment in the Republican Party who go, nothing to see here, it's fine.
They don't want to be wrong. Well, it's interesting. It's interesting, as clerk, they never would let us, my staff, go into the registration database from the time we started the election until the time it was certified. And so we had mountains of work to do to catch up after the election was finished. And I always wondered that. And now I know why. Because they're in there monkeying with the voter rolls. They're looking for low propensity voters, people that have moved out of state or whatever, people that don't, low propensity, meaning they're not likely to vote. And that's why you have people that will show up to the polls with their ballot in hand and say, I'm here to vote. And they say, you've already voted, because they're voting for these people. So when Matt's saying vote as late as you can, I agree with that. And that's why I don't agree with the Scott Pressler, the bank your vote, what Laura Trump is saying. But here's the thing. This is something you also have to consider. And Matt, I don't mean to disagree with you at all on this, but just for observation, when the polls would close at 7, right? And so as clerk, I would pull the total around 6:30, the preliminary total. And then I would post that right at 7, or I would pull that right at 7. I would stop everybody around 6:30. Then we would pull the results right at 7. And then that would be the preliminary vote. And that doesn't usually change by much. That's usually, you can rely on that. So if you vote at the last minute, though, those ballots, because there's ballots that keep coming in, because even when the polls close at 7, you still have people locking the drop boxes, loading up the ballots and bringing them into the main place to be counted, right? So you've got a lot of ballots that are still coming in. So if you have a huge volume of ballots, they won't come out in the initial preliminary count. So I would say sometime during that day, would be a good time to vote. But if you're voting right at 7 o'clock, those are going to be counted later. Does that make sense? And that's why, it might be midnight.
No, it does. And what I think what Beth was saying, Tina, too, was that the e-poll book was showing folks check not the ballots, but just checking in to vote had just jumped by 7,000, a minute prior. And she goes, that doesn't make sense. I've never seen that before. And it just jumped by, and it happened throughout different precincts in Texas. So the point of that is the machines, it's not just the tabulation, right? It's the voter registration files, it's the poll book, it's the tabulation, and it's the reporting. And I think as more and more information comes out per Patrick in these follow-on filings, you're going to see more. It's not just speculation. I think, Tina, it's going to be people indicating this is how we did this, and this is exactly what we did.
Exactly. And, paper poll books, paper everything. I mean, like Mark Cook says, we've got to decentralize elections. I mean, they were trying with HR 1, trying to federalize elections. We need to decentralize elections right down to the precinct, right down to paper poll books.
Couldn't
Nothing
agree more.
Connected later.
Could not agree more. And make sure that y'all join us for part 2 of our 2-part interview with Juan O Savin, Matt Meck, and Tina Peters. You don't want to miss it. 3 great patriots who have done an awful lot about election integrity. So please join us for that.
Thanks for listening to The State of Freedom. To stay on top of all the calls to action we mentioned today, just check out the show notes for the episode. If you'd like to support the show financially, visit our website at freedomstate.us. If you'd prefer to give by mail, you can send a check to The State of Freedom, LLC at P.O. Box 861, Berg, Louisiana 70343. If you own a business in Louisiana and are interested in supporting our show by advertising, please email us at info@freedomstate.us. To get involved with Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group, visit lacag.org, LACAG.org, or email Chris at chris@lacag.org. If you're enjoying the podcast, please subscribe and share it. Give us a 5-star rating in the reviews. Thanks again, everybody. We'll see you next time.